On the 19th of November 2025, the western Ukrainian city of Ternopil was struck by one of the deadliest airstrikes to hit the region since the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the bombing left 26 dead and the search for survivors. And victims continues, with 22 people still missing. The attack took place in the evening when a Russian missile targeted a residential building in Ternopil. The missile penetrated the roof of a Soviet-era apartment block, causing significant structural damage. This bombing is now considered one of the deadliest attacks on civilian infrastructure in Ternopil since the conflict began. Ukrainian emergency services have confirmed that many people remain unaccounted for, and efforts to locate the missing continue under hazardous conditions. In response to the scale of the destruction, President Zelensky spoke publicly, confirming the devastating human toll. 22 people are still missing, he said in a statement. Zelensky's remarks have focused on the ongoing rescue operation, with the city's emergency services working around the clock to recover survivors trapped in the rubble. The bombing has shocked not only those in Ternopil, but also the wider Ukrainian population, underscoring the continuing threat posed by Russian airstrikes to civilian areas across the country. The attack occurred just as emergency responders in the region were still recovering from earlier bombings. And the scale of this assault has raised alarms among officials and citizens alike. As soon as the missile hit, rescue operations were launched immediately. The scene was chaotic, with rescuers and emergency workers arriving on site as quickly as possible. More than 200 rescuers from various parts of Ukraine were mobilized to assist in the search and recovery efforts. These first responders faced difficult conditions, working through the night and in the face of further danger as additional missile strikes had hit other parts of the country. Emergency crews reported that the building, which had been home to many families, was almost completely destroyed. The structural damage was so severe that rescue workers had to use cranes to lift debris and access the upper floors of the building. Video footage released by Ukrainian emergency services showed rescue teams working in dimly lit conditions, painstakingly removing rubble in the hope of finding survivors. One of the most urgent and desperate goals for these teams was to find any remaining individuals still alive beneath the rubble. The images from the scene were harrowing, showing emergency responders working by the light of their flashlights, pulling survivors from the wreckage and attempting to stabilize the injured. "There are casualties," shouted one of the police officers present at the scene. The shock and gravity of the situation were felt by all, as the wreckage was strewn across the streets, with no indication of how many more victims might still be trapped inside the ruins of the building. As part of the recovery effort, Ukrainian officials noted that the city had become a focal point for search and rescue operations. In addition to local emergency responders, rescuers from other regions of Ukraine were dispatched to assist in the recovery efforts. Authorities have confirmed that these operations remain ongoing, with the full scale of the loss still being determined. In the meantime, as the search continued, Ukrainian emergency services warned that additional Russian missile strikes were expected, increasing the danger faced by rescuers. Despite these threats, the recovery operation proceeded without pause. With no clear indication of how long the rescue efforts would take, rescuers worked tirelessly, lifting debris and hoping to find signs of life. Overhead, drones and aerial footage showed the extent of the damage caused by the missile strike. Ukrainian authorities confirmed that a significant portion of the building had collapsed, leaving behind a mountain of rubble. The attack was carried out by a missile that entered the building's roof, causing multiple floors to collapse. Emergency services worked under the intense pressure of both the physical danger of the ongoing conflict and the psychological weight of the scale of the loss. "We need to get people out," a police officer was overheard saying as they entered a damaged building. The urgency in their voice was palpable, as it became clear that the priority was not just to locate survivors, but to also ensure that no one else would be trapped under the collapsed sections of the building. The bombing is part of a broader pattern of escalating violence in Ukraine, particularly in the areas that have traditionally been considered safe from the brunt of the conflict. Ternopil, a city in the west, has been considered relatively safer than the eastern regions, which have borne the heaviest toll of the war. However, this attack demonstrates that no part of Ukraine is immune from the reach of Russian military operations as Moscow continues its campaign of airstrikes and missile bombardments against Ukrainian cities. The search and rescue operations in Ternopil have drawn widespread attention, both domestically and internationally. Ukraine has called for continued international support as it faces mounting humanitarian challenges and escalating attacks on civilian infrastructure. The attack on Ternopil, alongside other strikes in different parts of Ukraine, is a stark reminder of the ongoing brutality of the war and the toll it continues to take on civilians. President Zelensky has reiterated the need for Ukraine's international partners to provide more assistance as the country struggles to manage both the humanitarian crisis and the military threats. This is a war on civilians, and it is imperative that we continue to stand together in the face of this aggression, Zelensky stated in his remarks following the Ternopil bombing. In addition to the human cost, the attack has caused extensive damage to infrastructure in Ternopil. City officials are still assessing the full extent of the destruction, which includes not only residential buildings but also roads, power lines and public services. The bombing of residential areas has further displaced families who were already suffering from the long-term consequences of the ongoing conflict. The recovery of both the survivors and the city's infrastructure remains a top priority for Ukrainian officials. The situation in Ternopil is not unique. Across Ukraine, civilian areas continue to be targeted by Russian missiles and airstrikes. In many cases, these attacks have led to widespread destruction and loss of life. Ukrainian authorities have condemned these strikes as violations of international law, with several high-ranking officials calling them war crimes. The international community has expressed concern over the ongoing attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Governments and organizations around the world have issued statements condemning Russia's tactics and calling for an end to the targeting of non-military sites. Humanitarian organizations have mobilized in response to the increasing need for assistance, particularly in the aftermath of the Ternopil bombing. As rescue workers continue their search for survivors, the toll of this attack on the residents of Ternopil remains unclear. What is certain, however, is that the search efforts are far from over. Ukrainian officials have pledged to continue their operations. Despite the ongoing risk of further attacks, we will continue our work until every person is accounted for, said an official from Ukraine's emergency services. This statement underscores the determination of Ukrainian authorities to provide the best possible care for their citizens, even in the face of immense challenges. At this time, the situation remains fluid and the search for the missing continues. As the recovery efforts move forward, Ternopil is left to grapple with the aftermath of this devastating attack. The bombing has already taken a heavy toll on the city and its people, and the full scale of the damage is still being assessed. This latest attack in Ternopil underscores the ongoing peril faced by civilians in Ukraine as Russia's military continues its aggressive campaign against the country. Despite the growing international condemnation and calls for an end to the violence, the situation on the ground remains dire. The search and rescue efforts in Ternopil will continue as long as necessary, with Ukrainian authorities doing everything in their power to recover those still missing and provide aid to the survivors of this tragic bombing. As of now, 26 individuals have been confirmed dead and 22 remain missing, while efforts to locate survivors continue. The bombing has not only caused physical damage, but has also shaken the local community, leaving many in shock and disbelief. Emergency services remain dedicated to the task at hand, and the people of Ternopil wait for any sign of hope amidst the devastation. In the end, the situation remains grim, with recovery efforts ongoing and the final toll yet to be fully understood. Ukrainian authorities are calling for continued international support as the human cost of this war continues to mount. As the search for survivors and victims continues, the people of Ternopil are left to cope with the aftermath of one of the deadliest airstrikes in the region's history.